one of the things that is almost more infuriating than anything doing this job is, well, first, obviously I get so outraged at what leaders that I think are really destructive do, like Trump. But there's something that hits even more close to home, which is when it feels like the people who are supposed to be better, the people that I would be uniting more with, aren't able to meet the moment or message effectively or lay out strong enough policies. And this is not an example of that. This is giving me actually a little bit of hope. And we started at the beginning of the show with that message of we're in a really dark time. But the feeling that this is going to be indefinite and that we can't get out of it is what I'm pushing back against today. I'm feeling a little optimist streak. And that's because of the stuff we talked about earlier in the show. And then I'm actually starting to hear Democrats speaking about who probably their opponent's going to be, which is JD Vance in a future election, in a way that is so much more compelling to me than what I heard in times gone by. So this clip of Josh Shapiro is what we'll start with. I also have Newsom and Buttigieg. You can kind of tell that the people who probably are running for president are starting to realize they need to put some heat on Vance specifically, not just Trump, but Vance, because he'll probably actually be the one running. And if it continues to sound like this, paired with really strong policies, I think the debate in the primary might end up being a much more productive, robust one that could lead to a strong candidate. But here's Shapiro's attempt at taking on Vance.
Yeah.
So was the release of the federal funds a mistake? Like just yesterday, Vice President JD Vance said, he called the court order absurd. Do we think that the release of the funds was a mistake, or is it a direct result of you guys going to court?
Well, let me answer both the JD Vance piece and the other piece. This is as a result of us continuing to push legally with the judge and the judge ruling that no longer would there be a partial payment, but
this is about food assistance,
full payment. And the moment we got that ruling, Secretary Arkush went into action, pushed that button, and got the dollars flowing again, the federal dollars. And look, as for JD Vance, I got to say, look, I think America has a president, a vice president that don't give a damn about all Americans. They have made that crystal clear. And at least with Donald Trump, he's transparent about that. JD Vance is a total phony. And let me explain why. JD Vance rose to some prominence by writing a book about growing up in Appalachia, where there's a whole lot of people who get SNAP. He made millions of dollars on the backs of telling their stories, and then he turned his damn back on those very people who he likes to write about and claim as his own. Here's another thing JD Vance claims. He claims to be a person of faith. I know my Bible. And my Bible teaches us that we are to love thy neighbor. That's right. And we are to feed the hungry. That's right. Deuteronomy says if you see a person who is in need, you don't give them a clenched fist, you open up your hand. So for JD Vance now to turn around after claiming all these things his whole life and literally go to court to stop hungry people from eating, that is not only phony, it is shameful. And this is who is leading America today. And folks got to wake up and realize the people who are leading in America quite literally want to keep people hungry. And you'll excuse me for getting emotional about it, but when I see hungry people in my state who are hungry because of JD Vance's bullshit politics, that makes me angry. And that's why I went to court. And that's why we're funding SHARE. And that's why we're putting dollars back on people's SNAP cards, because that's what the people of Pennsylvania deserve, and America deserves better than JD Vance.
Oh, whoa. Where did this guy come from? So a few aspects of that, and I'll show you more. But you notice he's saying JD Vance. Now, the reason is Vance was brought up specifically and has been a little bit of a figurehead for the Trump administration's legal battle, literally to not fully fund snap. That's what they're battling in court over. How Trump's approval rating isn't lower, it's already historically low, but how it's not even lower than that, I don't know. How it's anything, how it's 1%, when you're actually going to court to restrict food assistance during a shutdown, even if you could fully fund it. So that's why he's calling out Vance. But also I think it's because this is a little bit of a training ground for, or a preview of, the 2028 election and how that will be messaged about. And what I really want to see more of is questioning their intentions and what are normally off limits territories, like questioning someone's usage of their religion to inform their politics and saying, actually, the term he used was phony, but you're a fraud. It's especially powerful coming from people who, are willing to then cite the Bible to support what they're saying. And they're saying, even by what you say your argument is, I know it better than you and you're wrong. And that's been off the table for a long time. Well, he says that his politics is informed by his love for Jesus, so I can't really... No, say, I don't think it is. I think he's lying. I think he's a complete and total fraud. Trump doesn't give a damn about Christianity. It's just a tool he uses. Trump doesn't know a thing about Jesus. Vance is exploiting the stories of people and a religion to further what is a total scam, and actually ends up screwing over the very people that he acts like he really understands. Which, if his personal story is his real truth of where he came from, then that's particularly disturbing that he would then screw those people over. And calling out the intentions like that and making them argue why they think their life experience or whatever they say their principles are, or whatever they say their religion is, actually justifies their policies, puts them on the defense. And I think that's really good. Here's Newsom also taking it to Vance.
States, but think about the state of mind of the vice president. How do they honestly, how do you square the circle when you go to a prayer breakfast? How do you square the circle? I mean, Old Testament, New Testament. Well, what's the fundamental thing that connects from John to Matthew to Proverbs? It's this notion of hunger, feeding the poor, the sick, the tired. It's not an option, it's central to advancing God's will. I mean, the fundamental point that we'd be using, because this is what it's about, and the federal government said it in the lawsuit, that they want to use it as a bargaining chip to end this shutdown. That's shameful. It's never happened in U.S. history. And I appreciate the governors, the 23 AGs that stepped up and sued.
You see what I mean? This is the first time I'm hearing this. James Talarico does it too. Why has this never been call out? Wait, y'all are terrible on the economy. You don't care about fiscal responsibility, you fraud. You just balloon the debt so you could give rich people more things. You don't care about the working class. You and your billionaire buddies benefiting while everyone else suffers. You don't give a damn about abiding by Jesus's principles. Whether or not you're a Christian, you can point that out. And I don't actually think you care about the people that you say you came from. I don't think you care about working class, middle America, etc. Because here are the 10 things you're doing that are disastrous for them. Patriotism is another one. For so long, Democrats were so bad at calling out how Republican politics wouldn't actually be a patriotic ideology, and would just kind of hand those, all right, well, yeah, they say they're the economy people, even though the data doesn't back that up. They say they're the patriotic people. They say that they're the doing the will of God people. They can take all of that. Well, we don't want to challenge those things, but maybe we'll do healthcare. So that's really good. Then this in the wake of some of those takedowns, you had Buttigieg, also an old clip of him going viral talking about Vance.
I know there are a lot of folks who say, what's going on with some of these Silicon Valley folks veering into Trump world with JD Vance and backing Trump? What are they thinking? Silicon Valley is supposed to be, they're supposed to care about climate. They're supposed to be, pro-science and rational and libertarians. So normally libertarians don't like authoritarians. What's up with that? I think it's actually, we've made it way too complicated. It's super simple. These are very rich men who have decided to back the Republican Party that tends to do good things for very rich men. And by the way, that's kind of what you're getting with. That's kind of what you're getting with JD, right? So I knew a lot of people like him when I got to Harvard. I found a lot of people like him who would say whatever they needed to get ahead. And 5 years ago, that seemed like being the anti-Trump Republican, so that's what he was. Talked about how he was unfit, how he was cynical, called him an opioid, which is kind of a weird thing to say about a person, but definitely a really... But I mean, for somebody whose identity is that they're connected to Appalachia, which has an opioid crisis, that really is the darkest thing you could possibly say about Donald Trump, at least in public. But behind the scenes, apparently, he's actually calling him Hitler, right? Seriously. 5 years later, the way he gets ahead is that he's the greatest guy since sliced bread. And I actually watched this exact same process with somebody else I got to know in my days in the Midwest, which was my former governor, Mike Pence, who I watched.
So then you've seen, and we've looked at a bunch of clips of the Stop the Oligarchy tour, Bernie, AOC, and I think, and then with the elections that happen on Tuesday, there is such an opportunity, but it has to be paired with really strong policies, systemic change policies, that unites through brutal aggression. And what I mean, brutal political aggression. What I mean is there's some real unity to the economic resentment that people have and the awareness that increasingly almost every American connects with, that very wealthy interests end up being served, especially, not only, but especially with a Trump presidency and the Republican Party, at the expense of everyone else. And that now is the time to take back some of that power through the correct leaders who could implement better policies and won't be so influenced by those interests and those people. And that doesn't really wade into culture wars and identity stuff. And there's plenty of important debates that I've engaged in that we should have on those fronts. But this might be a moment where people can, I wish, look past some of the things that get us so spun out of control, divided, and screaming at each other, but never end up addressing the real fundamental problems in people's lives. And hearing some of these politicians, who are the three I just listed to you, and potentially AOC, who I referenced, running for president, all in different ways, and they're going to have to battle it out over then what they would do, not just why the other side's bad, but what they would do, and how that would be good for the working class. But they're all kind of sinking on a very different message that I've heard from the Democratic Party before, which is hopeful. And I would be, as a Republican, if I were a Republican, it would be hard to ignore the points they're making about JD Vance. It would be really tough. All right, I showed you Newsom. He did a rally in Texas. Here was a part of an interview with Jake Tapper.
Let me confide something in you, okay? When you came out and you announced Prop 50, to say nothing of the merits of it,
Yep.
I'm generally I like independent commissions, okay?
Yeah.
But beyond my own personal views,
Yeah.
when you came out with this, I thought, that's a big swing. I don't know what's going to happen politically. Just as a political move, the polls were against you.
Yep.
Schwarzenegger was against you.
Yeah.
Good governor groups were against you.
Yeah, that's right.
And ultimately, I didn't know it was going to be.
I mean, the first poll was 38%, just to underscore that. And again, because I, like many, agree with you. support independent redistricting. But you can't do it state by state with one arm tied behind your back. You can't unilaterally disarm as other people are not playing by the rules. Donald Trump and Republican governors across the country, governors not just in Texas, but you're seeing what happened in Missouri, you see what happened in North Carolina, obviously what's going to happen in Indiana, likely, and then Florida. They're not screwing around. They're consolidating power, and we were sitting there, and I think Donald Trump did not expect what Californians did. He thought we would try to win an argument by writing an op-ed, maybe express disdain and concern about the country. I don't expect
the Democratic Party of...
Yeah, of old, and I think that's the bottom line. And I think this moment, what happened on Tuesday, represents a new moment. Clarity, conviction, purpose, energy, on our toes, not on our heels, a resurgent Democratic Party. And it's a party that understands what's at stake for our democracy as we go into the 250th anniversary of our founding fathers.
So the only thing I want to hear more from, not the only thing, but a criticism I have for the rally that I watched, and maybe I missed key moments in some of these interviews, is the democracy stuff is important, obviously, and y'all know that has been the foundation of my entire argument against Trump. It all starts with his impact on democracy. But I've learned voters, your average random voter, is less concerned with that argument than the economic ones. And right here, how their life is going to be changed, how democracy crumbling impacts their life is a lot more theoretical, as fundamental as it is. And so, number one, do a better job of connecting an unraveling of a democracy, destabilizing people's lives, that not being good for them, that actually, as we're seeing with Trump, you have this authoritarianism, but it serves an oligarchy. So the disregard Trump has for our democratic process has actually served the very economic argument that I'm referencing. So connecting those better, and then from a lot of these different potential contenders, I need to hear a more clear vision for how then a Democratic leader would govern after winning, and what that would actually, how do we not just fix the problems that Trump created, but then the other ones that were there before. And I'm not hearing enough of that. I like the criticisms are getting a lot better, hitting Vance and Trump in places where normally Democrats would stay away from, getting more aggressive, Prop 50, fine, we'll redistrict then. All that I like. But then what's the vision in actual governance? What are the policies that we're talking about here? And there's a lot of little small things that won't ever get any press attention because of how much Trump is doing, and every day there's another scandal. But these are the little realities of good governance versus bad governance. There are thousands of smaller issues that if the leaders we place in power don't actually have our best interest, they'll just make little tweaks and slowly hurt your life a little bit more. Like this, the IRS is halting the free online offering for filing taxes directly. The new program, Direct File, helped low and moderate income taxpayers file their returns more easily and had been expanding. And now that's being halted. Some people are connecting it to this op-ed. The makers of TurboTax gave Trump inauguration $1 million. They just got their money's worth. And then another example. You had back during the Biden administration, a rule approved last year by the U.S. Mine Safety and Health Administration would cut the federal limit for allowable respiratory dust, etc., by half to help protect miners of all types nationwide from the current driving force of black lung and other illnesses. And now it's in jeopardy amid Trump administration cutbacks and proposals targeting workers' health and safety guardrails. And this ended up getting retired miners with black lung to demand that Trump honor promises that he made to the people who voted for him, and they're saying this is bad. So all these like little things you won't really hear about, and we could do that for hours of, all of a sudden they don't have the free filing on the IRS, or they're removing these protections to prevent minors from getting diseases, and in the lives of the people that it impacts, especially that second one, it's life or death. But it doesn't make for a headline that a lot of people click on. And that's why the big headline issues are super important, and people, leaders, actually having your best interests is even more consequential than even we understand.